am Amy Vetter, and welcome to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. This valuable time is for you to pause in your day and go on your own self-journey. Discover the beliefs that are holding you back from living your best life at work and at home. Learn from the guests on this show as they share their inspirational stories on how they found ways to break internal beliefs that were no longer serving them. Because if you believe you can, you will. And our podcast begins now. Welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs, where I interviewed Ginger White, who is a CMA CSCA and Chair Emeritus of IMA's Global Board of Directors for 2019-2020 fiscal year. She is also the U.S. Controller for Sun Hydraulics, located in Sarasota, Florida, responsible for month-end close planning, forecasting, and reporting. During this interview with Ginger, we talk about her family background and how she has had to face her fears even when uncomfortable to grow into a career that she could have never imagined as a child. Hi, and welcome to this episode of Breaking Beliefs. I'm here with Ginger White. And Ginger, do you want to start off just giving us a little bit of background on yourself?
Sure, Amy. Thanks. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Glad to have you here.
Thank you. My name is Ginger White, and I'm currently the Chair Emeritus of the Institute of Management Accountants. It's a global organization with over 140,000 members. And also, I'm the U.S. Controller at Sun Hydraulics in Sarasota, Florida. And I've spent the majority of my career in management accounting roles, and that's brought me here to Sarasota.
Awesome. So let's, get into your story of how you got into the career you're in today. So when you were a child, is that what you wanted to be, was an accountant, or did you have other desires when you were little?
Oh, wow. I've had many desires to do different things, and that's probably part of the challenge in life, right? Trying to figure out what that is you want to do.
Yeah.
Went through a phase where I thought I wanted to be a nurse because I was a candy striper. I thought I wanted to be a flight attendant so I could travel the world, all of those things. And then I somehow pivoted at some point and started loving math. And then I went on to school, never really even thought about being an accountant, quite honestly. I majored in business administration, loved accounting. It was fairly easy. And then found myself teaching accounting one at night and loved it. And quite honestly, I felt like I would be a professor because I really, really love teaching. And the university I was teaching at night, they changed the accreditation standards that required a master's degree and work experience equivalent, and I didn't have either at the time. And I heard about Cummins and that they would pay for your master's degree. So I joined Cummins in order to get my master's degree and quit and teach full time. However, I spent over 21 years at Cummins in various roles. Finance. So.
Oh, okay. That's awesome. So let's go back. So why did you want to be a nurse?
I think just caring for people and seeing that you could make their lives a little brighter during the day.
Okay.
So I remember one gentleman, he had really bad kind of emphysema, and he would come repeatedly back to the hospital, and just seeing him and making his life a little bit brighter. So I think that was probably what drove me to want to care for people.
Right. And was there anyone in your family that was medical, or how did you start volunteering there?
So my mom was actually what was called a red coat, and she had heard about the Candy Stripe program. So I did that when I think it was a freshman in high school.
Okay.
And I really, really enjoyed it.
Okay. And then you did that for how long?
Just about a year, I think. Yeah, just about a year. And then I started working at McDonald's. that was my high school job, working at McDonald's, checking out people when they would order their food and so forth.
Yeah. And so what made you want to be a flight attendant?
I think just the interest of travel and getting to meet new people and new cultures and just see the world. So I think that was the big draw on flight attendant.
Okay. So interesting in your role today, because I know you and what you do, that I think you've actually kind of merged this into your career, but we'll get there.
Okay.
So so you became an accountant.
Yes.
What was there anything, during school that was influential to you in making the decision of which direction you were going to go with it?
That's a great question, Amy. I think it probably was Dr. Patricia Isaac. She was my accounting professor at Berea College. And she taught me accounting 1, 2, and intermediate accounting. And just the sheer, I don't know, she appreciated like my work that I did on my course and things like that. And I did really well in the class. And she was a great professor and was able to explain, the accounting concepts quite well. And then it was more like she was a friend, not a professor far removed, right? She insisted we
Right.
call her Trish. We call her Trish, not Dr. Isaacs. And then also another colleague at the college, Marty Kazura, was another big influence in my life. She taught business law, and she also taught accounting too, but I had her for business law. So yeah, both women were very influential.
And how were they influential? Like, how did it pivot with what you were going to do?
That's pretty interesting you ask, because this is probably pretty deep, and I don't know that I was planning to go there.
Yeah.
But so
That's what I do here.
that is what you do. There's something else there, Ginger. I just want to pull it out. Yeah. So actually, when I went to school, I come from very humble means. Both my parents never completed high school. Neither did my 2 older brothers.
Oh, wow.
One of my older brothers did go back and get his GED later, and so did my mother. However, when I went to college, I didn't think I could do it. I had this self-doubt, and my freshman year, I had a 4.0. So I was like, wow, I guess I can do this. So, but then I got active in a lot of things. So I think having them as professors too, and then seeing that I could do it and they encouraged me, I think encouragement was the big key.
And was it because they were women, or did they know your family background, or?
I don't even think they did know my family background.
Yeah.
I think they had that care and that touch,
Mm-hmm.
which probably also inspired me to want to teach. Probably,
Right.
deep down, that's probably,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with your family, never going past high school, were they supportive of you going to college?
Actually, my mother, yes. My dad, not so much, because he really wanted me to stay home with him because I was his little girl, and he thought I was doing just fine. Which I was doing okay, but I knew that I would never probably go very far if I did not get a college degree. He later came around and was very supportive, because I remember a really tough semester because I was about to jeopardize my 4.0 because I'd gotten too involved in different organizations on campus. And I called them and
Shocking,
said,
having known you.
I know.
I think you still do, right?
Yeah. So I called him and I said, Dad, I'm ready to quit school. I just want to come home. And he's like, oh, but you're doing so good, right? He became my biggest promoter.
Oh, wow.
And so then the next day he calls me back after he had pushed me to stay at school. And he said, if you want to come home, you really can. I said, no, Dad, I just wanted to vent a little. I'm fine now. I'm just fine.
Yeah. So what was it then that drove you to do this? I mean, so even before those professors, right? Like, you didn't have examples in your family of doing this. I mean, what was a driving force inside you, not only to have the confidence to go do something that is kind of, territory that you've never seen before or been modeled, but also that you'd want to, not having the example.
Right. Yeah. I had worked at another company called Robust Leather Corporation earlier in my career, right out of, I went to a Ivy Tech. It's a technical college for legal secretary technical certificate. And when I finished that, I went to work at Robust as like the secretary for about 6 months. And then I was promoted into customer service. And I was taking care of all of the customers at this small company. And I wanted to be like part of the sales manager group because I felt I could do it, but it was very male dominated. And I was never given that opportunity really, right? Just stay and do your customer service thing. And then I saw other positions posted and it required a master's degree. And I'm like, I think I could do that, but they're never going to give me the opportunity if I don't have an education. So that's kind of what drove me to start thinking about, I'll never get a chance if I don't get, you know, a college degree because it's really, really required. And so that's really what made me drive that path. Now, why I chose Berea College, my sister-in-law, which is quite interesting because she was in nursing there. And she quit and married my brother, my oldest brother. And so that's how I found out about Berea College. Because no student pays tuition. So, but all students have to work on campus. So I've always been a frugal person.
Where is this college?
This is in Berea, Kentucky.
Berea, Kentucky. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. And there's about 1,600 students that attend there. And about 85% are from the Appalachian region, 10% are from other parts of the US, and then 5% are about international students.
Wow.
So yeah, it's a phenomenal program, and all of the students have to work at least 10 hours a week to help run the college. So that's how I ended up there, and that's where I got my bachelor's in business administration.
That's amazing.
I love the college. Oh my gosh. I was like, oh, free, yes, and I'll be done, right? Quicker than if I tried to do it on the side.
They still do that, or is that?
They do. Wow. They have a huge endowment. It's phenomenal. Wow. They call it the little Harvard for poor kids. But it's wonderful. It's such a good college. It's amazing.
So, okay, I'm fascinated. Now you got me. So you graduate. What's your first job in accounting? So you didn't become a professor, obviously.
No.
Yeah. So
my first job in accounting, okay, so when I went to Cummins, my first job in accounting was teaching accounting 1, I guess, at night.
Oh, okay.
That would have been my first job, sort of. And I did that for 2 semesters before I went to Cummins.
Okay.
And my first job at Cummins was not in accounting. It was in engineering change control.
Okay.
And it was an hourly role. And my whole purpose was just to get in there so I can get my master's degree, right? That was the whole purpose. It was about education, not really working there.
Yeah.
And then I was there for about 1.5 years, and then I transitioned into a cost accounting role.
Okay.
So I did cost accounting for a couple of years there, and then I was promoted to fixed asset manager. And at the same time, I was working on my MBA at night, and I finished that in May of 2002. And then I also had transitioned our fixed asset work to our shared service location in Nashville, Tennessee. And that was my spring semester. And then when I finished that role, I did a cost analyst role and then finance manager role. Then I did a Six Sigma black belt role in finance. And then I did an Oracle systems implementation in Japan, China, Korea, and Singapore. And then after that role, I was asked to be the XPI controller. It's a small business unit, like a mini business unit, 3 manufacturing locations. And I was a controller for that at Cummins. And it was a joint venture with Scania. And then I knew I would, go ahead.
So going into that first job, how did you know how to act or go about your day? Like what were you looking to, or, you know, for examples, or how were you feeling as far as your confidence starting that job?
So in the first cost accounting role?
Yeah. That's
a great question. I think doing the engineering change control made an amazing segue into the role, because I was already familiar with the bill of material structure, which is critical to any cost accountant. And then it was a simple costing role at that facility, because basically we did process costing. So we had the bill of material structure, and all of the product we made there was basically the same. So we just spread our manufacturing expenses over the quantity we produced. So that was fairly simple. And then I moved later into our corporate costing team that did some of the more complex costing, which required allocations of cost and things like that because every product was unique. And those products were, much more difficult to roll up the cost and do the allocations and so forth.
So, but how did those roles come available to you? Were you looking for them, or did someone tap you to take on that next role?
So the first cost accounting role, the company had done like a separation package and quite a bit of finance and account. So it was in finance, HR, and IT. That was back in '98. And so quite a few people took that package, and then that opened up a role for me in '99. So that's kind of why I heard that role was coming up.
Okay, you heard it was
Yes,
open,
yes.
and you
And then I
decided you
reached out.
wanted that. Okay.
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And
then the second,
go ahead.
Then that second corporate costing role, I had heard about that role as well as I was being tapped for the managed expense, like planning, forecasting, reporting, finance person at the plant where I was doing costing. And I opted for the more corporate costing role because I only had to worry about me, and I was working on my MBA at night. And so I didn't want to have to worry about a person reporting to me, the person that was going to backfill me learn my role, teach all of those people, right? Plus do my MBA at night. So I decided to take that corporate costing role. So I just have to worry really about training the person that was backfilling me, and then plus just do my job at the new role.
Yeah. No, it makes sense. So when did you start supervising people, and how did you have the skills to do it by then?
Yeah, let's see. I think my first supervisory role was when I was the fixed asset manager. And I have to say that was probably one of the most difficult roles and rewarding at the same time, because I had been their boss for about 6 months when we decided to move that work to Nashville, Tennessee. And it was probably because I love people and I never want harm to come to them in any way, shape, or form. And these two employees that reported to me were phenomenal, right? They had been at the company for a very, very long time. And they knew that those jobs were actually going to move probably in June the following year. But we decided to move earlier, mainly, and it was really for them because there were about 35 roles that were going to be made available to any employees that were available. And I wanted them to have first choice because they had the highest seniority. So I had talked to my boss and said, hey, can we move this work now? Because I kind of explained all the reasons why. And so it was a really tough call. And so we decided to move early, and I tried to orchestrate things so they knew that we were really trying to think for their best interest and them to get the other opportunities there in that location. So, and when I told them, they were glad the way I handled it. And it's a union, it's an office union. And so I couldn't really tell them or ask them. I had to try to make the decision and coordinate with the labor relations team who coordinated with the union and all of that, right? But I wanted to be the one to tell them, and it worked well, and they were grateful. So not easy. And so first supervisor role is pretty tough. So
right. So then that helped set the tone of your leadership style from there?
I think so. Yeah, I think so. Just always trying to look at what's good for your employee and how do you help them, get to where they want to be and think about them and their future.
So how do you do that today? Like when you're leading people, like how have you put that into practice?
So I'll shift back to prior to leaving from Cummins. And so my employees, I had one employee that English was a second language, and I kept getting feedback, people don't understand him. And I had no issue. I completely understood him quite well. And so also he had never had accounting. So I had him take an accounting class, and I also had him do Toastmasters, and said, you can just do that, right? Just during the day when you're here at work, just go do that every Tuesday. And so just his confidence. And when he came into the role, he was not very confident. He inherited something where he had to kind of clean up some stuff. And he was afraid to deny savings projects, right? And things like that. And I said, David, that's your job. And I remember that because I was kind of that way when I first started denying purchase requisitions, right?
Right.
I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. But you kind of get over that because you have to,
Right.
that's your job, is to control the costs. So, um, and I got him to where we really defined the rules around the cost savings projects, and people got to really love and respect him. And that gave me so much more joy than anything, right? To see him excel and have confidence. And yeah, and he had a lot of respect from the whole team, and they really appreciated him. So that's one area. And then my other person, just encouraging her. I sponsored 3 Six Sigma projects for her, and so that was on her to-do list. And also, she called me just actually in January and told me she had just completed her bachelor's degree, and I was so proud of her in accounting, because she's not young, right? She's got a lot of wisdom and has been working for a while, and such an amazing, smart person, but again, never had that opportunity, probably in her family similar to mine. They just didn't see the value in in an education per se
Yeah.
at the college level. And to see her get that done, and then to call me and tell me, was like, oh my gosh, I'm so proud of you, right?
Right.
And it just gives me a lot of joy to see them excel. And she's got her, Six Sigma Green Belt certification, and now she's got her bachelor's. And then her son is going to college now, which makes her very proud too, right? And
Yeah.
which is awesome. So she's broken that in her family, right? That tradition of,
Right.
you can do more. You have more value than you think, if you find the support and the encouragement you need to do that. So that's really what I enjoy, trying to say, where do you want to be? How do I help you get there? And I'm thinking about, who's my replacement even now? How do I groom them and make them be extremely prepared, if I leave or whatever someday, right? So they need to
Hmm.
be prepared and never put the company in a bad way, right? So if you don't prepare with succession plan really well, you cause harm to the company and the other employees left as well. So I think that's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. So what it sounds like is you nurture people individually rather than trying to do a one to many, because that can easily happen where people get branded, like your story with the English with the second language happens so much, where people just don't have the time to kind of help that person along, even though you can see potential. um,
And
so where they feel supported along that path, then not only helps them in their career, but creates more happiness in their roles, I would assume.
absolutely. And it's interesting because I think you hit the nail on the head about the one-to-one versus the one-to-many. Um, I love mentoring. And so my Six Sigma Master Black Belt role, that's what I did a lot of.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're mentoring individuals on their projects, you're helping them see the patterns in the data. And when they see it, they're like, wow, I get it now, I understand. And just seeing that excitement for, discovery, I guess, in an individual and their learning and so forth. It's
Yeah.
it's a lot. It's a lot of fun, just the mentoring and imparting knowledge so their lives are better.
Yeah. And you can see how your story actually has translated into your leadership, that you're trying to help other people like you that, have gotten it, that it's possible. And then the other, so that kind of was in your nursing side, but then you have this travel side, that you've been able to incorporate into the work that you do through the IMA, correct?
Absolutely, that's
So
right.
how did that path go? How did you even get started with IMA and have the confidence to take on a global board role like you have?
It did not happen overnight. I'll tell you that. So it actually started when I took that first cost accounting role. So Cummins is a big supporter of IMA,
Mm-hmm.
and they have their own local chapter, which is mostly Cummins employees. There are some other businesses that also have members that are in our chapter, but for the most part, it's Cummins. And so I had a colleague that worked with me and said, Ginger, you should come to a luncheon and check out IMA. You should get on our board, our chapter board. all these kind of things, right? And I had no idea what I was doing, quite honestly. I was pretty green. And then I had Ron Luther. He's been a mentor for a long time for me. And Ron had reached out to me and said, hey, Ginger, would you like to be our student rep at the council level? And I was like, well, what does that mean? And he said, well, if you come to 4 meetings, we'll pay your way to San Diego. And I'm like, okay, of course. And then they paid for my conference fee and everything. And so then I was hooked once I went to the conference, and all of the learning that happened there was phenomenal. And I was hooked, right? They talked about XBRL early before it ever became, in corporations and things like that. So I had heard about it before it ever, was a thing in corporations. And quite honestly, it's kind of facing your fears, because I'm a small town girl, really small town, actually didn't even really live in town. So big cities are scary, right?
Yeah.
They make you anxious if you're from a small place. And, but the more times you expose yourself to those things, they suddenly don't become fearful. Because you're the only one that feels that fear. The other people around you don't even notice you're fearful, probably, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and now you travel around the world.
I have.
So how do you communicate back to your family what you do and what your life is like?
They kind of probably don't even know all of it.
Yeah.
I've given them some of the magazines where I've written the articles for strategic finance, and but I think they don't really even know, and that's okay, right? They just know me as me and who I am. But they do know that I travel. Like at Cummins, I remember I traveled quite a bit in Juarez when things were not very safe down there. And Cummins always, keeps us safe when we would have to visit the plants and so forth. But my mother always knew, and it always worried her. But she always also, she has faith and she prays, and I appreciate that. So
yeah.
So I feel a great deal of protection, I guess, from that. So anyway, yeah. So I tell my mom, right, I'm going to Dubai, Abu Dhabi, Jordan, all these places, and she's like, oh, okay. Yeah.
So how do you integrate those two sides together? Because I know, for any of us, our backstories, right? Like, it is kind of what churns inside of you while you're trying to show the face of who you are to the world and what you want to be, but not lose yourself in the process as well. So when do you think you became comfortable merging those two sides of you?
Wow. Do you ever?
No, not necessarily. Yeah.
It's interesting because that's a great question. That's a very deep question. And it's almost like my family, because they don't necessarily realize that I talk to a room of 1,400 people, right?
Right.
I don't ever tell them that, oh, I talked to 1,400 people today.
Right.
They have no idea. So I'm just me around them, and it's more about them. I don't talk about myself much, really.
Yeah.
When I'm with my family, it's more about them. I care about them. I want to know what you're doing. So they don't necessarily know that I talk to large groups of people or whatever, and then when I've had a talk that it's changed somebody's life, that again, right, it's almost you've touched that one person, and maybe more than one person in that group, but just to know you've made a positive impact, that's really what life's about for me. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing story. Awesome. Yeah. And I think these are the stories that bring color to the people around us. Is, everybody's kind of walking around, with who they are at work, but you don't understand all the facets to them, or, pieces that made them who they are along the way. And it makes you even more fascinating. And a lot of times I think people kind of hide those things because they're like, oh, what would they think of me if they knew this, instead of like, wow, that's amazing,
Thank you.
So I'd like to, so I do some rapid questions at the end, and you pick
Okay.
a category. So the category you can choose from is either family and friends, money, spiritual, or health.
Family and friends.
Okay. So things or actions that I don't have that I want with my family and friends.
More time.
I can only imagine why, right?
Yes, yes.
Things or actions I do have that I want.
The connections and the lifelong friendships and connection to family, for sure.
Things or actions I don't have that I don't want as far as my family and friends.
Drama.
Yeah, that's right.
Which I don't have too much, thank goodness. But
Yeah,
I don't want drama, but I don't have too much, so that's good.
That's good. And then the last one, things or actions I do have that I don't want with my family and friends.
That I do have and I don't want with my family and friends. That I do have. Distance. I have distance from my family and friends, and I don't want that. But it's just what it is right now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So is there anything you would like from this conversation that people take away from your story or from anything that you do that you want to make sure we close out with?
Sure. So I think, don't be afraid. I've heard other people say, face your fears, live uncomfortably, because if you do face those, at some point they become somewhat comfortable, and it helps you grow. Being uncomfortable helps you grow. And I think that would be good. And then find a professional organization like IMA, the Institute of Management Accountants. I think that organization has really helped me grow tremendously in my leadership capabilities and so forth. So just making sure you have, positive encouragement around you. Not to say that all of those interactions will always be positive, right? You may also have some challenging people you have to deal with, and that's part of the growth. And find someone to kind of debrief with that you trust in certain situations. And you may have different mentors along the way, people that you've met, they mentor you in one area or another. Because as you grow in your leadership skills or within your companies, you may find really hard things going on, and you need somebody that you trust, that it doesn't affect the company and so forth, right? That you discuss challenges with, and they're going to keep it in confidence. So I think that would be some of my words of wisdom. And don't be afraid to ask people you respect for a mentor. I've done that a few times, and it's worked out quite well for me. So I think that's really important.
Well, great. Well, thank you so much for being on today and sharing your story. I'm sure a lot of people are going to have a lot of lessons to take away.
Thank you, Amy. Thanks for the opportunity. I really appreciate it. It was so awesome to spend time with you in Phoenix.
Yeah, it was. It was great. And now for our mindful moments with this interview with Ginger, which I found absolutely fascinating, as I do so many times, because I love learning people's backgrounds and stories. And hers in particular was extremely interesting, with her growing up in the Appalachians and really breaking the patterns of the past, the generational patterns, and moving on to go to college when some of her family had never completed high school, which, when you think about this path, and so many of us have different stories that we grow up with and take into the workplace as well. But it's really important to think about how these stories affect us and the way that we lead and the way that we work with others. And there were so many turns where Ginger could have had self-doubt of whether she could be good enough. And instead, she really observed and followed the path that was in front of her. And for many of us, we can let that self-doubt really take over rather than stepping back and allowing the path to happen, being aware of what's happening, but knowing that there is a path. And there may be times in our career that we enjoy more than others, but each thing leads to the next thing. Now, one of the lessons she talked about was, when she was young, of the types of things that she liked to do. And one of them was volunteering at the hospital because she loved having that impact of caring for others. And the other was a dream of becoming a flight attendant so that she could travel. And I think this is really important when we think about our origins and our stories, of how we're able to apply those feelings of what serves us and what creates value for us personally into the jobs that we do today. Did she become a flight attendant? No. Did she work in a hospital? No. But in every one of her stories, you could see the through line of caring for others, of how that helped her in her career. And by her taking on different roles, whether that be through her career or through the IMA, she's able to achieve that joy of travel and learning new cultures and being able to see the world in a world that she was basically sheltered from growing up. So as homework, I think it's important to step back and think about, what are those values that we hold dear, that we want to put out into the world? What is the experience that we want to create with other people? And when we can actually see how we do that in our daily life, we can gain so much more satisfaction and just utter sense that we made an impact in the world, even if it's a tiny impact, right? That we mattered to somebody else, that we actually created value for someone else, passed on our knowledge to somebody else that they could be able to gain from and improve their lives. And when we can see we make that impact, it makes everything we do more meaningful. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to listen to the Breaking Beliefs podcast. I hope you will take a moment to pause before entering back into your day to reflect on this podcast and note 1 to 2 actions you are inspired to do from today's conversation that you could incorporate into your life. To read the full blog and listen back to this episode or any other, you can find them at www.amyvetter.com/Breaking Beliefs podcast and related videos on my YouTube channel. For daily inspiration, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn at Amy Vetter CPA. I hope that you will choose to like this and subscribe to this podcast on iTunes, Spotify, and more, so that you can join us for more inspiration on our next episode.